this summer for 2 great days of conversations about the future of Ukraine with both Ukrainian and international experts. Hope to see you there. So now, on a related note, we're going to head into our final session of the day, and the topic is the fight against Russian authoritarianism. We have the great pleasure to be joined for this conversation by Nika Gvaramia, a Georgian politician and the founder of the Ali Party and the Madvari TV. He's one of the biggest TV outlets in the country. As former Minister of Education, he received the Georgian Presidential Order of Excellence for reforms in education in 2013, the International Press Freedom Award in 2023, and Ukraine's Rada Medal for Merit to the People of Ukraine, also in 2023. We'll also be joined by Evgenia Kara-Murza, who worked as a translator and interpreter for several non-governmental human rights organizations, including the International Center for Nonviolent Conflict, Modern Russia, and the Free Russia Foundation, before joining her husband, Vladimir Kara-Murza, a prominent Russian politician and human rights activist in his pro-democracy and human rights work. And finally, Ivanna Malchevska is the project manager and coordinator of the Ozon Public Monitoring Group at the Center for Civil Liberties. She coordinates the organization's volunteers as well as the direction of involvement of volunteers in the practice of public control over law enforcement agencies, local authorities and courts. This session will be moderated by Ekaterina Kotrikadze. She is the news director of TV Rain, an independent Russian language television channel, which was banned by the Russian government but continues to operate in exile, serving millions of Russian viewers every day. Please, Ekaterina, take it away.
Hello everyone, good to be here with you. My name is Kotrikadze, and I'm really honored to be here. So thanks a lot to all the organizers of this. So one can think that the fight with evil called Vladimir Putin, the president, so-called president of Russian Federation, is sometimes lost. You can sometimes have the impression like that. Let's see. As a Georgian, I remember 2008, I was in Tbilisi when Russian tanks were destroying the villages in my country here, and I was seeing like terrible attack on Georgia and an attempt to occupy Tbilisi, which didn't happen, but they're still occupying 2 regions of Georgia, as you all know. As a Russian citizen, I am the person who was expelled from the country. I am the one who was forced to leave Russian Federation, and I am actually a foreign agent, officially, in Russian Federation, which I assume has some kind of associations with Georgians right now, because we are witnessing the attempts to do the same here in this country, unfortunately. And I was expelled from Russia, and I had a feeling a couple of times that I lost the fight with this evil. But, I can see that there are so many people who are fighting it, and we may sometimes fail in battles, but we have a big war to win in the future. And I'm sure that there are people who are brave enough, who are smart enough to be stronger than this evil called Vladimir Putin. So I would like to talk to my colleagues here, people who are really very important in this big fight with authoritarianism, Russian authoritarianism. Representatives of 3 countries who are really symbols of a different future for themselves and for the millions of those who are really thinking and hoping and dreaming about democracy. Ukraine, Georgia, Russia. So Ivana, I would start with you if you don't mind. First of all, after this 2+ years of a terrible war in Ukraine, after this terrible invasion, which is killing people every single day, and this, you know, it's a devastating situation. But you guys are still optimistic. How do you manage to, you know, to be strong after experiencing such a terrible invasion? What is the source of your strength today?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today at this very important panel, and thank you for this very important question. And I think that the answer is that we just know that we fight for, you know, that all Ukrainians that are now on the battlefield, they know that they fight for better future, and they fight for Ukraine, democracy, liberty, human rights, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and all that values that Putin are afraid of. And let's be honest, like Putin, like it's not war between two countries, Ukraine and Russia, Russia and Ukraine. It's the war between two ways of life, democracy and authoritarian regime. Putin not afraid of NATO, of Ukraine or Ukrainians. Putin is afraid of human rights, freedom and democracy. So we just know that we fight for our values, and we just don't have another way to accept this war, and we just need to deal with it and to do our best to defeat Putin.
Thank you. I'm sure that there are chances, and chances are big, but I will go to Evgenia. And I'm sure you know that Evgenia's husband, Vladimir Kara-Murza, is in jail, and he's my friend. So this is extraordinary person who is suffering just because he was fighting for freedom and democracy and who wanted to live in his country. I would ask you, if you don't mind, Evgenia, thank you again for being here. At what point exactly an opportunity to influence the authorities of Russia were missed? What was the moment when everything went down? You know, because we had the feeling that we were still free. Well, we could do something, we could talk, we could criticize the government, we had some opportunities, but at some point everything was lost. What was this point exactly?
Thank you very much for the question, Katya, and it's a pleasure and an honor for me to be here today with you and to be on this panel. It's a great honor, truly. And this is my first time in Georgia, and I am absolutely, utterly excited, and I just walked, I took a 1-hour walk to come here to just see this beautiful, vibrant city. You know, I don't think that we can talk about a specific moment, because this authoritarianism has been creeping slowly, pace by pace, over 2 decades. To some, the nature of the regime was clear, was absolutely clear at the moment when Putin came to power. My husband always remembers that point when Vladimir Putin, still as a prime minister, not even president, still as a prime minister in 1999, installed a memorial plaque to Yuri Andropov on the FSB building in downtown Moscow. Yuri Andropov was the chairman of the KGB, and he was the one who introduced punitive psychiatry as a method of fighting dissent in 1969 in the Soviet Union. And it is to this man that Vladimir Putin decided to install a memorial plaque on the FSB building in downtown Moscow. And to my husband, this was the moment when he realized what kind of a regime, a system Vladimir Putin would be building in the country. A former KGB officer, operative. The only thing a KGB operative knows how to build is a gulag. And so right from the very moment, from the very first moment, he decided to do just that. And over the years, has been committing those crimes. His government has been committing those crimes very similar to what we're watching now in Ukraine. Because the full-scale invasion of Ukraine as the result of over 2 decades of impunity. As Katya said, the invasion of Georgia in 2008, the annexation of Crimea in 2014, war crimes committed in Syria and in Chechnya, and for all these years, peaceful protests were being violently squashed in Russia, and more restrictive, repressive laws were being adopted to silence dissent and scare people into silence. So when Vladimir Putin did not get a strong enough response to any of those crimes in the past, he decided that he could get away with pretty much anything. And I mean, why not? If he can annex part of Georgia and Ukraine, Crimea, why can't he do it to the rest of Ukraine? If he's allowed to commit war crimes in Chechnya and in Syria, why not in Ukraine? So in his warped mind of a dictator, this is very logical. And so I think that what we need to understand now, and this is maybe at this particular moment, this is maybe even more important than understanding a particular moment when it all went wrong, is that for as long as Vladimir Putin remains in power, warmongering will continue and repression in the country will continue. Russia will continue being a threat to itself and its neighbors for as long as there is this repressive, totalitarian, really, already, regime in the country.
I would just add that you can guys, if you want to add something, just do it. But I would go to Nika with a question about the interests of Russian Federation in Georgia. All of us here understand what the moment is right now. And, that people like to say this is a historical moment in the country's history, but this is a historical moment in Georgia, as I understand it. I think Nika would agree with me. Because right now, they're trying to repeat the path that I was at the moment, years ago in Russia. And I'm still on it, if we consider Russia. So I would just, try to understand together with you, what are Putin's motives to, push his interests in Georgia? Why is he doing this? And how influential this Russian agents, I would say, Russian agents are here in this country?
Fine, thank you. I will start, and I must start with the announcement that I and my fellow compatriots, Georgia, stand for Vladimir Kara-Murza and his cause. He is the great Russian. He is the great Russian. He is the real second Russia. I mean, that's not Putin's Russia. There are not a lot of guys across the universe who are Russians and who can fight for democracy, not just in Russia, but across the universe. That's a very rare occasion, unfortunately, and Vladimir Kara-Murza is this example, the very, I would say, the clear example of that. That's a Russian who, the neighbors of Russia, oppressed people by the Russia, would be happy to have as a leader of Russia. So I am standing for him, and I will ask for you. I'm asking for you to give some credits and applauses to this guy, the huge, great Russian. So what about Putin's interest and Russian interest in Georgia? Nothing new, actually. That's 300 years or 3 centuries that there is pretty much same interest in Georgia, and pretty much same vehicles are working for that on the ground in Georgia, and nothing has been changed in Russia. That's a Tsarism country. There is no other, kind of setup in this country. There is no signs of democracy. Maybe few years, if not few months of Yeltsin era. Maybe that's a questionable pretty much, but there is no other examples of having any other setup of statehood in Russia except Tsarism. So Tsarism in any particular century and any particular era. So that's why Russian approach is the same. So Russian can be oppressed. That's having shortage of food or any other things, but they are happy always if they can kind of take over any other neighboring countries or neighboring territories. No one knows why they actually need it, or no one knows for no reason, but they are always happy. Unfortunately, that's a mentality. That needs the huge work. That needs more education. That needs reforms of this state. And I'm not sure that this territory, now called Russia, this one, not 6 now, but 7th of the whole planet, could be ruled by democratic government. Is it any possibility to rule, of democratic governance on this territory? I don't think so. So dissolvement of Russia, it's a possibility for the rest of the world, but it is a possibility for Russia itself, I think. So European part of Russia could be the part of civilized world, not this country now called Russia. So what is the interest in Georgia? Nothing new, as I mentioned. So just having Georgia as a zone of influence, not maybe part of the Russia, but zone of influence. So, the gray zone where they can launder money, maybe different stuff, which is pretty much dubious or pretty much vague, as the weapon, some kind of different stuff, which is conventional crimes, etc. So the same with Abkhazia. They need Georgia as Abkhazia, breakaway territory of Georgia, which is now under no one's rule. There is no one's land now. So South Ossetia, etc. And how they are working, that is new actually, how they are working. It's a propaganda stuff. Propaganda stuff, maybe it's even more tough to resist for us than even some kind of direct invasion of the country. You know why Ukrainian and when Ukrainian won this war? That's main stuff. It's main point of winning this war, and they are already winners. I'm pretty much sure that's a matter of time just. That was anti-propaganda stuff. This footage when Zelensky and his team aired their announcement that President Tut and different guys Tut, that was defeat of propaganda.
Yeah,
and
it was
that
defeat
was
of propaganda.
winning of this war.
It was the same moment when Volodin said that Zelensky left Kiev and that Zelensky was running to
Yes,
Poland.
and that's why it's a defeat
I
of
remember
propaganda. You know why? Because that's main point of Russians was not intervention of Ukraine, was not even this, kind of weapon, different weapons, or that's this army, Russian army, or etc. That was propaganda war. That's all of them are leaving Kiev right next day of invasion. Answer was very clear, very tough, and in right shape, in right, I would say, It's a formally very right. So the propaganda is, extremely dangerous, but we can resist propaganda. What is main Western kind of misunderstanding of Russian propaganda is that they somehow try to explain for us, who understands Russian much better, that propaganda could be defeated via lectures, preaching and teaching, some brochures, etc. Media literacy in the era when pace of propaganda is huge, that's highest possible. Media literacy, it's a bullshit. So you have no time for triple checking when you are speaking about propaganda. If propaganda is provided via entertainment, you should defeat it via entertainment, period. You can't defeat it via brochures. You can't defeat it even via news. If it is, some Russian project as, some kind of, I don't know even what's the names of Russian projects of entertainment, but you can defeat it via Western project of Voice or Got Talent or something like this, because entertainment is for general public and TV is for general public. TV is Coke, it's Coca-Cola. That's Coke is something different. Okay. It's Coca-Cola, it's not champagne, it's for general audience. And propaganda is for general audience. It's not for wise people who can make own kind of resumes of everything by their own. So let's start to think Russian propaganda as it is. Let's call a spade a spade. Everything has its own and adequate names.
And this is what you do.
That is what we are doing.
Ivanna, I would ask you a very tough question, if you don't mind, as a representative of Russian journalism. I can see that one of the results of this invasion of Ukraine, of this war with Ukraine, is the loss of contacts with Russia. I understand for many years to come, there would not be cooperation, partnership, any kind of friendship, obviously. This is something that has actually cut all the contacts and burned all the bridges between two countries. Could you please reflect on that? Because it is very important to, understand what is the future. Because to all of my friends, this is a great tragedy for Russian friends who are against this war. But this is not your fault that this is happening. So could you give me a couple of thoughts about, this is what they did. This is what Putin did. He has lost Ukraine. He was trying to occupy it, but what he did is actually, for many, many years to come, he has lost the neighboring country. Please.
Very tough, but I think that I have an answer, and that I know a lot of people that have or had relatives in Russia, and they have friends in Russia, and these friends, after the beginning of the full-scale war, said, "Oh, finally, we will free your nation from the Ukrainian occupation." In the times when your house is destroyed and your relatives is killed in front of your eyes, and maybe your mom is raped in front of your eyes by Russian occupiers, in that situation, I can understand this absolutely logical, yes, emotional, but decision of Ukrainians to stop any dialogue with Russians. Absolutely, and I think that you also can understand if you imagine this situation. About dialogue, I know. But I also will say that the dialogue with Russians are possible, But in a very concrete case, when these Russians on Ukrainian side, and they, first of all, want not the fail of Russian Federation, but they want the victory of Ukraine, first of all. And second is that these Russians are doing their best to make Ukrainian victory closer. In that conditions, the dialogue with Russians for Ukrainians, for the majority of Ukrainians, are possible. And you may know that our Center for Civil Liberties, we have the dialogue with Russians that actually help us to release our civilians who were illegally captured by Russian occupiers and were imprisoned. And these Russians help us to release these people from Russian captivity. And we have a couple of cases that we made this, and we released a couple of Ukrainian civilians from Russian captivity. And if you know the international law, it's absolutely not allowed to take civilians into captivity. And maybe I want to share, one story that maybe will make the understanding about this possibility of dialogue more understandable for you. Is that a couple of days ago, one prominent Ukrainian soldier was killed on the battlefield, Pavlo Petrichenko. And today I was reading Twitter and I saw a tweet that I want to read this. Those who make it to the end will be the loneliest orphans in the world. And these words are about all Ukrainians now, because we by ourselves fight Russia in our within our borders. And only Ukrainians, yes, with help of international legion and with help of Russians who also joined the fight of Russia with Russia on the battlefield. We by ourselves doing our best to defeat Russia and to make the victory closer. So yes, the dialogue is possible, but we are ready for dialogue only if Russians are ready to make the Ukrainian victory closer. It's the only condition.
And I think what you're saying right now is one of the very important things that we will need to think about after the years and after the war is over. And this is something that Vladimir Putin cannot acknowledge, as I understand it, because actually he's losing the sphere of influence. What was Nika talking about, right? It's the sphere of influence. Historically, Russian leaders want to control the neighbors, to control the biggest part of the world, and so on and so forth. This is actually an opposite result of invasion. You cannot be a good guy and a dobry tsar, right, when you invade someone. So I think that this is a very important thing to understand for him. So I will go to you, Evgenia, if you don't mind. When we talk about fighting Russian autocracy, it always comes to mind that there are Western democracies which should actually help in this long-term and very, very complicated battle that you are going through and we're going through. So, would you, as a person who visits this European Parliament once a week and parliamentary assemblies and different organizations in Brussels and Strasbourg and Washington DC and others, and you talk to people, and your husband has the perfect connections, right, with the politicians, Western politicians, and now you have this contact because you are keeping this torch of Vladimir and fighting for his future and future of the country. So do you have a feeling that these guys are really listening to you and are saying, and not only talk about changes in Russia, but also do something to change the situation? Not only talk about help to Ukraine, and this last couple of months are getting me to the point when I can hardly talk about the real efforts of these people. Sometimes it's only cynicism that we hear and see. But okay, let's go to what you think about these people and how strong is the will of Western partners to change the situation in the region.
Katerina, you're absolutely right. For many years, for 2 decades, business interests, were more important than human rights. I remember how in 2012, people were beaten into pulp in the streets of Moscow during the Bolotnaya protests. And Western leaders expressed concern and signed the deal for the construction of Nord Stream. So imagine what kind of signal it sent both to the Kremlin and to Russian civil society. The Kremlin realized that it could go on doing the same stuff because the West would sign all the needed deals. It would continue doing business nevertheless, after expressing concern, of course. And the Russian civil society realized that, no one cares. We are on our own. No one couldn't care less. So for many years that was the case, and that was the case after every single of the Kremlin's military invasions into neighboring territories. That was, again, the same. There was never a strong enough response that would make the Kremlin understand that these crimes would not go unpunished, that he would not get away with committing those crimes. Never. And so now we have a full-scale war, a full-blown war in the middle of Europe, where Ukraine, on the forefront, like Ivanna very rightly said, it's not really just a war between Russia and Ukraine. This is a war between 2 systems, between authoritarian regimes and democracy. And Ukraine's victory is truly, democracy will not be able to survive without that, without Ukraine's victory in this war. Because if Vladimir Putin is allowed to represent anything as his victory, then warmongering will continue and democracies will slip even further. But with regard to what can be done now that everyone, I hope, has finally realized what is happening, again, not everything is just as we would hope. I mean, it's true, for the last 2 years I've been going around the world talking to everyone who's willing to listen, and those who are not willing to listen, I make them listen. And 3 points. Because I always think about, to me, the situation, today's situation, very reminiscent of the 1980s. When at the very beginning of the 1980s, it felt like all hope was lost. Like the Soviet Union will go on forever and ever and ever and never end. And then the Soviet Union was weakened by the war in Afghanistan, by its own crumbling economy. And people realized that if they went out in the streets and in hundreds of thousands, that could actually bring some change. Those protests would not just be drowned in blood, like it happened in Belarus in 2020. And so the Soviet Union collapsed. So for the last 2 years, I've been going around the world with 3 points. Ukraine has to win this war, which means that the Russian army has to leave all the occupied territories. Sanctions should be not just imposed, but really sort of thought through. There's so many holes, it's so easy for them to avoid those sanctions. That should be prevented. And not just economic sanctions that would weaken Russia's economy, but also targeted personal sanctions, for which my husband fought since 2010 and almost died twice, because he survived 2 assassination attacks in the past, and we believe that was in retaliation for his fights for the introduction of the Magnitsky legislation around the world, the legislation that introduces targeted personal sanctions against human rights violators, thus sending a very clear signal that we will look for specific criminals and go after them. They will not get away with committing those crimes. And the third point is support to that part of Russian civil society that understands what is going on and is doing everything it can to bring closer the day when the regime collapses. And I'm talking about hundreds of political prisoners in Russia, about hundreds of thousands of Russians who left the country and continue their work from outside. And I work with such an organization, the Free Russia Foundation, that is doing an amazing job bringing together different pro-democracy and anti-war initiatives. And all our work, all the work that we carry out is only possible because of those people working on the ground. Those amazing, intrepid activists, lawyers. Ivanna mentioned that the Center for Civil Liberties is working with some Russian lawyers. We have a specific project dedicated to the locating and representing Ukrainian civilian hostages and war prisoners in Russia, Poshuk Polon. And this activity is only possible because there are these Russian lawyers working on the ground, finding those very tricky ways to locate these people in the very intricate Russian penitentiary system and make sure that they're represented, that they have connection with their families, etc. So those 3 points. And I come here from Strasbourg, and where something very important happened, because in one day, on the 17th of April, exactly a year since my husband's sentencing to 25 years in Moscow, 3 resolutions were adopted by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, 3 resolutions on Russia, all adopted unanimously. These resolutions deal with the murder of Alexei Navalny and the much-needed response of the West, the much-needed response of the European community to that murder, with support to Russian civil society and the systematic character of repression against anti-war protesters, and with Vladimir Putin's illegitimacy and the need to use targeted personal sanctions, Magnitsky sanctions, against human rights violators. And the legitimacy is a very important part here, because just recently, you all witnessed that, Vladimir Putin reappointing himself to a 5th presidential term, after he completely destroyed the country's constitution in 2012 through a so-called referendum that was not accepted by international organizations, the results of that referendum. This so-called election was carried out in the absence of any real competitors to Vladimir Putin, because all of them are either in prison, in exile, or dead, like Boris Nemtsov and Alexei Navalny. And this so-called election was carried out on occupied Ukrainian territories where people are forced and coerced to vote in the right way or to accept the Russian citizenship in exchange for humanitarian aid. No such process can be seen as a legitimate process. It has nothing to do with what is called election in any democracy. And thus Vladimir Putin cannot be seen as a legitimate partner on the international arena, but should be seen and treated as what he is: a criminal, a usurper, and a dictator. So I believe that the adoption of these 3 resolutions unanimously by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe shows that there is finally this understanding that something needs to be done, a clearer understanding about this. And I hope that it also shows solidarity with all those Russians who are trying to resist the regime and bring closer the day when Russia can become a democracy and finally not be a threat to anyone anymore, including itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Ivan.
If I may, I want to add that Evgenia brings us to the very important topic of justice, and I really like the theory that if you want to build the peaceful world, you need to punish all the leaders who start this war. So in the case of Russia, we actually need to really achieve the justice for all, the justice for Russian political prisoners, justice for Ukrainian civilians in Russian captivity, the justice for all Ukrainians which houses were destroyed and which relatives were killed. So we really need to think about what we can do for that, and I think that it will be our instrument of influence and building better future. And also I want to say the quote of Mr. Kara-Murza, which I really like, that Kremlin is afraid of peaceful demonstration more than concrete sanctions. And one more, no matter how strong the dictatorship are, if enough dedicated people are willing to stand up for the freedom, rights and dignity, they will win. So I think that we really need to think how we can strengthen Russian conscious citizens that are who want to defeat Russian authoritarian regime, how we can help them and how they can really make the rally that will change all. So I think it also will be the issue.
Thank you. And we have a minute. And Nika, I would ask you to answer my very simple question. What's your plan? What's your plan, Nika? I mean, how do we defeat this evil? And I have started with the question about authoritarianism fight, which is in a different stages in 3 different countries. We see almost failure in Russia, but almost is a very important word here. Very
That's a key
important
word.
We can see how Ukraine is fighting Russian authoritarianism bravely, and everything depends on it. And there is Georgia, which also fights Russian authoritarianism, but in a little bit different way. We fought the war in 2008, but the scale was different, right?
Yeah.
And now this is a different type of fight. What's your plan?
So our plan is our next generations. That's 2 days we have. The whole week we had some kind of manifestations. That's my generations. Maybe different generations are engaged in that. But last 2 days we have absolutely incredible thing. That's protest of kids. I mean teenagers. Which is unprecedented for Georgia, and maybe for the whole universe, because whole world, because that's literally kids are on our streets and with very different energy, very different vibe, very different kind of. They are hopeful and determined. They are determined. That is most important thing. We are hopeful, that's my generation is hopeful. They are determined. They can deliver. They know that they can deliver, and they will deliver. I promise, they will deliver. My father was dissident and political prisoner. Recently, I was political prisoner. My son was, yesterday was in these manifestations, and I have no any desire to have him as a political prisoner, and I want him the last generation fighting against Russia in this country. We are sick of this Russian thing. We are sick of that, and Georgia is Europe. It's not pro-European society. We are part of Europe. We are part of European civilization. So, and we will become member of European Union, and my generation will do everything to pass this country to next generations. You know why Russia is now very, very kind of pushing so much because they know that this is last momentum. Last momentum because for our next generations, Russia is mere geographical givenness, nothing else, nothing more. They can't understand what is Russia about. Those people are citizens of the world, and our country is their country. They should lead this country. They should deliver, and they will deliver. So my heart is warmest both for them, and I love you guys. So do everything what you can do, everything what you do, you can do, you must do. That is your homeland.
Thank you.
Right.
I think this is the best finishing line here. I would just, again, thank everyone who organized this. It's really important that young people are involved in politics. You guys should be involved in politics. Never think that someone else should decide your fate. This is you who decides. And this is your country, your future, and your democracy, your rights. Just one thing that I wanted to add with that is that I really hope that Russia, after years, I hope that sooner rather than later would not be just a scary big thing which is trying to occupy the neighbors. That Russia can be different, really. Let's see. Evgenia and I think that it's possible. Thank you guys. Good luck to everyone.
So please join me on a round of applause, our final keynote speakers of the day on this great panel. Thanks to